Good evening. Welcome to Emporia State University and the ESU Special Collections and Archives. My name is Curtis Becker, and I am here tonight with the Emporia Writers Group. Tonight we are going to present pieces based on the theme Rebirth. A simple metaphor, spring is rebirth, but symbolism can go even deeper. This is our triumphant return to a live event after what seems like an eternal dark winter on Zoom. Trust me, Zoom is. We are back and grateful that you are able to join us. Up first, the author of Blue Collar Saint. She's a graduate of Emporia State and Emporia native. Please welcome my dear friend, Brenda White.
Oh, okay. Okay, the first piece I'm going to read is called Tuffy on Sunday Morning. I stitched close the cat's baby, her favorite amputee mouse, innards reinserted, flesh pulled taut, and sides laced tight with quilting thread. The baby lives again. This morning, she carried her precious into the kitchen, calling around its bulk the song queens sing to kittens when teaching them to hunt. She has no kittens, but her mouth and heart are full. It is Sunday, and resurrection enough for her. This next one is called Full Pink Moon. The moon is full and pink before Easter, blushing amid stars, planets, the Pleiades. She portends blossoms with her rose hue, butterflies and newborn grass, a pink pearl casting light on Earth's return to life, sprouting grass moon, egg moon, the color of surprise. She knows about redemption, victory over death. Pink as new flesh, she gleams like an ascending soul. Winter is just a stone she rolls away. Okay. I don't know how much this one goes with redemption, but sort of visually. The amazing Kundalini, appearing twice nightly, and now I will escape from a snuff box, rises toward the rafters in rainbow-colored tights, sparkling, arcing blue, white, neon orange, lavender, clear as a column of God and spinning like a planet gone awry. At ceiling, he fragments and spangles and drops of variegated light, pelts the floor with incandescence which pools and amalgamates into a magician whose skin irradiates and glows amid gasps, fainting bodies, and blistering applause. And I suppose this poem is sort of about rebirth. I think you know what I'm talking about. This one's called Tenacity. Grandma B married 16 times before she found her one. She filled an empty well with alcoholics, with vows God joined and life put asunder, with disappearing for weeks on end to be found not prone by destitution and prostitution, thousands of miles from home. She looked for love, for connection in all places, savory, sour, sweet. Something made her dust off her heart, her hope, and rise like Lazarus to try on living again and again, no matter what it cost, how badly it fit or ripped apart. She was no quitter, and she managed to glean a 40-year marriage from the dross of her life lessons, each one hard as creek gravel on bare feet. She still believed she could share God's ear, convince him to save a premature child solely with love she poured from her heart, like syrup and melted butter on pancakes she prepared by herself. God was in the details and disasters, Faith was a matter of patience spread over years as she crawled from her knees each time to stand. Okay, one last one. This one's for Lindsay. This is the antithesis of rebirth. Or maybe it's almost rebirth, but not quite. This poem is called Damned. Bill was sitting in his bathtub when the rapture came, his atoms vibrating fast enough for God. This being lifted skyward till he realized he was nude. Plopped back to the physical, Bill surveyed the soapy slump on his linoleum in dismay. I was cleaning out the pool when he relayed his fate to me. You might as well stay with us sinners, I said, sweeping and sweating, my flesh around me like wet clothes. Unconsoled, Bill moaned of God's impatience, bad luck, and discomfort at eternity in the raw. I saw no reason to voice the odds of clothes or bodies for souls sucked up to heaven like leaves through a hose. Who knows? Bill felt foolish enough as it was, dropping with doubt from God's redemption, and I can't kick a man when he's damned.
Thank you, Brenda. Our next author this evening is the author of Vacant Childhood. Not only is she an alumna of ESU, but she also teaches composition and literature here. Please welcome my friend, Lindsay Bartlett.
So I'm going to read a creative nonfiction piece that I wrote. I actually submitted this to Frontpost Review. I don't know if it'll be accepted, but that's okay. So it is called Reframing My Rural Past. In western Kansas, one can see for miles. Grain elevators stick out of the earth like push pins on a map, marking all the places I have been. My parents were rooted to that place, a farming community in central Kansas. My mother was the daughter of a farmer and a school teacher whose ancestors had immigrated to rural Kansas from Germany. Generations had worked the land, gotten married, had children whose children had had children, and set down deep roots in the dirt they plowed. My father, a native of Seattle with no desire to return to the big city, stayed in Kansas upon leaving the army after Vietnam and marrying my mother. 14 years later, they had me, their only child. When I was little, we lived in a giant dilapidated old farmhouse. We had no central air or heating, and until a well was dug when I was in 3rd grade, we ran water into a cistern using a pump and a garden hose. In the summers when it was too hot to sleep upstairs, the three of us would sleep downstairs in the living room. We burned our trash in a barrel and took the rest to the dump. For years, I thought this was how everyone lived. At 14, we moved the 20 miles into the town of La Crosse, to my grandparents' former home. Gone would be the summers of riding my bike through pastures and swinging in the hayloft of the barn. I cried when my parents told me we were moving. We'll get cable, my mother said, trying to buy my approval. Not that my approval was needed. The summer before my freshman year of high school, we loaded our belongings into cars in an old Toyota truck and moved to the house that was part of my mom's inheritance. For the 4 years of high school, I was an unhappy teenager whose only thought was of escape. I was ready to graduate by the time I was a sophomore. So after receiving my diploma, I left behind the small rural farming community that I had grown up in for the Flint Hills region of Kansas. I sought to distance myself from my rural small-town past. I arrived at university from a town most people had never heard of. While I wasn't necessarily pegged as a backwards country bumpkin, I also felt like I was behind in a game so many of my peers already seemed to know how to play. Going to university is a whole new ballgame for rural students, something I quickly discovered. However, I soon became intoxicated by everything my college town had to offer. So even when I felt like I didn't completely understand the game, I had fun playing along anyway. I majored in English, I fell in love with books and the power of words. I was and still am a voracious reader. I started to travel more, including a summer trip to England with 8 other students and one of our professors. I loved rubbing elbows with the brilliant faculty members in my department. It didn't take long for me to identify more with my university counterparts than with the rural farm families I had grown up with. By the time I graduated 5 years later, I didn't want to leave. Flash forward to the present day. more than a decade after my undergraduate graduation, thanks to the wisdom and experience that comes with age, along with a broader worldview, I started to think more about my rural upbringing. I started to long for those days on that old farmstead of my childhood. This longing was in part put into motion by the rapid deterioration the farmstead was experiencing after being abandoned and left to the elements for multiple years. A trip to visit my childhood home in 2017 was a heartbreaking experience. However, this visit was the catalyst for me to start embracing my rural past rather than trying to run away from it. My home is filled with reminders of where I come from. The walls of my living room are full of old pictures taken with a film camera of the farmstead I spent the first 14 years of my life on. There are pictures of the house in the snow, pictures of the majestic barn, closest thing you get to a skyscraper in rural Kansas. A picture of me as a baby with my Grandpa Hagerman out in the harvest field. Grandpa in his usual overalls and long-sleeve shirt is standing in front of a combine and a wheat truck, holding me so we are both facing the camera. There's a painting done by my Uncle Steve of me standing amongst knee-high weeds in front of that dilapidated old barn on the farmstead. All of these reminders of a past I have tried for years to outrun. Our society does little to keep young people in the rural communities they grew up in. We live in a world that encourages upward mobility. Oftentimes the writing on the wall is all too clear for rural teens. Go to college, move to a city where jobs, opportunities, and culture are plentiful. This is referred to as a rural brain drain, and it poses a serious threat, both socially and economically, for rural America. As fewer and fewer college graduates remain in small towns, these rural communities become less attractive to other young graduates. The portrayal of these places also contributes to young people wishing to leave. When media portrayals of their rural communities are nothing but offensive caricatures of the actual place, when young people do not see themselves and where they came from accurately portrayed in any type of media, from news to television shows, it is easy to feel a sense of embarrassment and a desire to leave, to flee to a city somewhere that is portrayed less negative, as less of a joke. Over a decade ago, in an undergraduate American nature writing course, one of our assigned texts was Becoming Native to This Place by Wes Jackson. In this essay collection, Jackson writes not only about sustainable agricultural practices, but also about how societies encourage upward mobility. Society's encouragement of upward mobility has caused young people to leave rural communities. He explains that this idea of being constantly on the move and never really becoming native to a place has caused significant harm, not only to rural communities, but also to the land. The farming community in which I grew up has fallen victim to both the rural brain drain and society's encouragement of upward mobility. Pictures of my hometown from the 1960s show a thriving downtown with multiple shops and cars lining the street. In the present day, the once thriving Main Street is full of empty storefronts, and only a handful of cars line the street at any given time. Many of my family members, as well as the folks I spent much of my childhood around, are farmers or have a connection to farming and the land. They have farmed for generations, and they know no other way of life. However, it has gotten significantly harder for small family farms to continue due to the rise of factory farms and policies that seek to value a place only so it can be exported. These folks who have tended to the land for so long are now having to choose whether it is worth it to continue fighting to survive, or if they should pack it all in and get an office job in town. All of this is easy for me to pontificate about as I write from a coffee shop in my university town, and it might even sound a bit hypocritical given I am part of the rural brain drain. I left my small hometown for college and I never went back. However, sometimes leaving where you are from can lead to a deeper understanding. After all, as author Sarah Smarsh wrote in an article recently published by The Guardian, we carry our backstories with us, and many who leave are eventually summoned home, whether by familial duties or abiding affection for the complicated place that shaped them. I carry my backstory with me, and rather than running away from it like a younger me tried to do for years, I have let it inform who I am. My rural background influences my writing, my teaching of composition students at the university where I work, and the respect I have for those whose lifeblood involves working the land and growing the crops that help feed this country. My hope is that the more I write and present about my own rural upbringing and the people who live there, the more we will see a switch in the way rural communities are discussed and portrayed. The next time I leave my college town for lacrosse, rather than trying to leave as soon as possible, I will instead make a concerted effort to listen to the stories of the people there, pay attention to the issues affecting them, dig into my roots, and try to find a way to share the stories of the people who are often overlooked. Thank you.
We will continue with the theme of alumna of ESU. Our next reader has her master's degree from ESU. She's a retired teacher and the author of well over 10 books, mostly children and young adult titles. Please welcome Geraldine Henriksen.
I'm not sure exactly how this qualifies as Rebirth. Sort of, because it begins with this. Oh, it's too low. This is a booklet called The Best of Emporia State, dated 1980-81. I'm in here. I wrote an assignment, a final paper, for a class called Women in Literature of the Great Plains, taught by June Underwood. Anybody remember her? Well, she was fantastic. I loved the class. I did get a little tired of locust plagues and prairie fires. but I fell in love with Willa Cather. I have short terms, you know. I told him to remind me when I was not to come out here because I couldn't remember long enough to know that I was third and fourth where I was. But at any rate, I wrote this story about my grandmother, and I have always wanted to use it to make it something bigger. And so she's being kind of reborn, I guess, and I called my original piece Martha Remembers because I'll give you some more information about how I did it. But I decided as I got into this thing that I entitled it Remembering Martha. That was my grandmother's name. And I'm not sure quite what it is or what it's going to turn into. I'm about halfway through and I've got about 50 pages. And I think it's going to be a kind of a sort of a memoir. But there's fiction in it. So in order to marshal my thoughts, I wrote this. And this is how the story will begin. When you pick up the book and read it, this is the first thing you'll see. It's called An Opening Aside. I'm going to commit a literary no-no and begin my story in first person, then switch to third. It's sort of like an actor looking into the camera during the movie and speaking directly to the audience, thus shattering the illusion that what the audience sees is reality and not a made-up fiction. Well, it worked for Ferris Bueller. I also feel it only fair to warn you that I am what is known in the world of literature as an unreliable narrator. I just may tell the story to manipulate it to suit my own ends, and it's up to you to figure out what those ends may be. So here goes. In the 1980s, during my stay-at-home mom days, cheaper with 4 kids than hiring a sitter and teaching, I enrolled in a class titled Women in Literature of the Great Plains, beautifully conceived and taught by June Underwood at Emporia State University in my hometown in Emporia, Kansas. I loved the class, even though, as I said, I got a little tired of prairie fires and grasshopper legs. But Will and Catherine captured my heart, and June Underwood insisted on making me a better writer by pointing out that the asides and parenthetical remarks in my papers and essay answers were more relevant than the rest of my ramblings. The final assignment for the class was to write a 15 to 20 page paper based on interviews and or research about a woman of the plains. I chose to write about my grandmother, Martha Remembers, born in 1897 in Neosho Rapids, Kansas. At the time of the interviews, Grandma was in her 80s and living near her youngest daughter, who agreed to bring her to my house for the day. We were all 3 excited. Grandma got a day out, and Eddie got a day off, and I got to see both of them, plus pursue my assignment. Grandma had told me many times that a good housewife always had all her daily chores finished by 9 o'clock in the morning. Aunt Evelyn dropped her off at my door at 8:30. Grandma was so Sometimes I had to rewash and rehang because of burnt. Anyway, we had a lovely day. She was a lively storyteller, and I a rapt audience. June loved my paper and submitted it to the best of ESU for that year. It was accepted, and I'm using the resulting paper as a yellow dog-eared skeleton to create a fictionalized version of Martha's childhood. Beyond her childhood, I am drawing on my own memories of her and the recollections of other family members and friends. Some characters are imagined, most dialogues are my creations, many names are fictional. Don't be surprised if I drop it again for another sigh. Remember Ferris in the shower? And I am the author, so I need to make all the decisions. I promise not to appear nude with my hair shampoo. Now I'm going to read you a little bit of the result. Okay, it starts out with my grandmother's Mother's Day. My grandmother was just 4 years old when her mother died of childbirth. But I'm moving on through the story a bit. This is chapter 1. One morning, Sadie, the telephone operator, came to the door with a message from Mrs. Van Gundy. She had an errand for Martha. She had baked a couple of mincemeat pies for old Joe Camper, an elderly farmer, an occasional customer of Papa's, who lived a couple of miles east of town. Martha walked the 2 blocks to the Van Gundy house and took the basket of pies from Mrs. Van Gundy. Here you are, Martha, said Mrs. Van Gundy, handing Martha the covered basket. Take these out to Joe, and if he's not at home, you and your family can have it for supper. Martha began her little journey. Hot, fragrant pies hanging in the basket on her arm. Normally, such a trip would have taken most of the morning. It involved stops to mimic the redbird's call and poke a dung beetle with a stick or collect leaves from the nut of sumac, turning just her favorite shade of red. But that day, she dutifully trudged the 2 miles, slowly opened the iron gate in the fence around Joe's house, tiptoed up the porch steps, across the porch, tapped lightly on the door, waited for Joe to come for several minutes, slipped back across the porch, down the steps, across the yard, out the gate, and hurried home where the family enjoyed the pies for supper. That's my grandma. If you find it somewhere, done somewhere on a shelf sometime, and buy one. It's going to be called Remembering Martha. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. We are always excited when we do these readings to see current ESU students here in the audience. And as a treat, we have yet another alum of ESU. This man is the author of 3 collections of poetry: Dirt Road, Rusted Weeds, and Turnpike Prairie. He is a martial artist. He is a gravel grinder. He's an international man of mystery. The sexiest man alive. Wordsmith unparalleled. And I don't think he thought I was actually going to say that. But he is one of my best friends. Here is Carrie Boyer.
Oh, get real.
He's also the tallest member of the Writers Group.
I think I'm gonna tune on. That's good. All right. Hi. So thinking about Rebirth and new starts, I got to thinking about, for my first book, I wrote a piece about weeds, and it's called Weeds.
I bet it's about weeds.
And it's about weeds. No, it's funny. I was just thinking about how weeds are hardy, strong, tough things that just can't kill them. You know, There's a lot of metaphor that can be drawn from that. And here's the poem. Weeds. Freer weeds grow among the grasses. Hardy notched roots holding deep and fertile ground, or found splitting stone and rock-choked soil. Stubborn foliage found thriving where native flora dies. Standing bold, defiant, cursed leaves and vines, coming up between concrete cracks, discarded topsoil bags. Wild things making a home wherever rebel seeds fall. The water sent from bursting clouds will help them grow, while God smiles down upon his scorned creations. So, a close friend of mine said, we're talking about people. It was really, you can. So the next piece I'm reading is one that I hadn't thought of. It's for my second, Rustling Weeds. And a friend suggested it. And I hadn't looked at it probably since I wrote the book. So it's kind of neat to have somebody recommend something. But it's called Harvest. The backstory is I spent time on the farm in Oklahoma growing up every summer, and during harvest, my grandpa would take me to the grain elevator to get the wheat tested and sold. Anyway, this is about going to the grain elevator. It's called Harvest. Harvest saw machines cut wheat. Acres of gold weighed, tested at the elevator. Farmers in trucks lined up for scales to weigh their grain and hope that moisture didn't send kernels home to dry. If it was wet, they sent it home and had to send the granary and it cost the farmer money. Okay, so I ride bikes on gravel roads, and it's challenging and fun. And a couple of years ago, a company bought the ride, Dirty Cans Unbound. And so they get at the very end, they had these ice cold yellow towels. If you got to the end, you came down the chute, they put this towel on your neck, and it was glorious. So I wrote about it. And this is co-wrote with Curtis, because he gave me some really cool creative ideas for it, so we came up with this together. It's called Cold Yellow Towel. At mile 80, off my back to sit on the chase lounge while salsa guy snapped a pic. This route was new, hot, long, I'm Cohola crushed, drip dried. My body wanted to quit. Heat exhaustion had set in and cramps for 70 miles, but my friends got me home. We moved kind of slow. Cheers, cowbells. While coming down the chute, I high-fived a couple of guys. Cheers, cowbells. Heard my name called. Cheers, cowbells. A hug from Jim, then the damnedest thing. This young woman put a cold yellow towel on my hot sunburned neck, and it was joy. Pure damn joy. That was cool. Cold, actually. Cold on the record. Very cold, but glorious. So I thought about the idea of rebirth and what do we do to re-energize ourselves and things we see and do, right? So I thought about getting together with friends, and I like fire pits and hanging out. So I made this really cool fire pit out of Arkansas sandstone. And I wrote a little something about it. It's called We Gather. I dug up rock from hard earth, dropped sweat like hot rain from a salty soiled forehead onto Arkansas stones, stacked in a circle for logs to burn on cool autumn nights. We gather here for quiet, for light, for heat. So my grandpa loved to grow tomatoes in the garden, and he would give me tomatoes, whether I wanted them or not, and whether they were still good enough to eat or not. But some of my best memories of going to my grandparents' house has been loading up a Walmart bag or wicker basket of tomatoes. So this is called red tomatoes. Red tomatoes from the garden, picked, placed into a wicker basket on the counter, and Grandpa asks, would you like to take some home? Grandpa's blue eyes over the top of glasses, his busy hands already finding the plastic bag, where I would say yes, like always, for love, for him to give, for me to receive from his garden, and and then coffee, the news of the day, before Grandpa would go to his recliner and nap. And the last one, I actually wrote sitting in Starbucks with Kevin, and I thought nothing is rebirth. Coffee. Coffee is rebirth. Who agrees? Right? So I wrote this. It's called Like Morning. Espresso machine spits. Barista whips foam. She pours hot milk. There is a chatter. Coffee cups clatter, clang, a hum. This place smells like morning. Thank you. And next up is International Man of Mystery. I can't talk. I can't even talk. Curtis is a genuine lover of words, a promoter of everything good about why people write. He's a loyal, genuine friend, talented, educator, author, publisher, and a good soul. And I'm honored to call him friend. Curtis Becker.
Thank you, Carrie. You know, many of us do think of spring as rebirth, and maybe that's how we arrived at this theme. But for me, rebirth has always been fall. And I think that this perception has maybe been shaped by my life as an educator, especially during my time teaching here at ESU. I think back to the optimistic faces, the beginning of classes in August, new school supplies, shiny floors, and always new adventures. And it's kind of a rebirth of our summer selves into the new school year selves. So this poem I have written is a form of Japanese poetry that is actually older than the haiku, and it's called a tanka. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. The way that the form goes is it's instead of the normal haiku syllables, it's a 5-7-5-7-7 pattern, and each line can stand on its own. That's part of the deal, and then all 5 of them together make an additional statement. So this one is untitled, but it is about fall. The leaf dances, swirls, shadows stretch across the road. The air bites my face. Pumpkin spice invades the store. I purchase a fancy scarf. I also see rebirth as us coming back together after our time spent with COVID and with isolation. And I had a lot of time to write during COVID. That was one of the great things about being home. And I actually got to the point where I was coming up with things to write and to do because of that time. And so I reflect back on some of my experiences during COVID. I actually moved to Topeka shortly after COVID started, which is it's really weird to move when the world is in lockdown. These were some of my experiences. Sometimes I go to Hy-Vee at 10 o'clock. I don't really need any food. I just need to see people. This next one, a young man has COVID. He wishes he could smell again. An old man has COVID. He wishes he could breathe again. And my last observational one here. I understand why you died in that hospital without your family. I still don't like it. Inspired by Cheryl, who was really good at list poems, I tried a COVID list poem, and this one is called COVID Kills. COVID kills us, our ability to smile at others, people we love, social gatherings, holidays, the little lady down the street who gave the full-size candy bars out on Halloween, even last fall, our sense of community, mental health, common sense, hugs. Carrie mentioned coffee as a rebirth, and I have that theme as well. And for me, morning is such a time of rebirth. I am comfortably sleeping in bed, and this alarm that some crazy person, probably me, set for in the morning goes off, and all of a sudden I'm trying to clear the fog out of my head, and coffee is an important part of that ritual. This poem is just called Coffee. Sometimes no coffee comes out of the machine because you forgot to add more water. That's the day you really need coffee. And I'll close with this last poem. To me, rebirth can also be transitional. We lose or we leave one thing and we move on to something new. And sometimes when we're moving on, we don't even know what that new is going to be, what that rebirth is going to be. And so I wrote a poem called Last. There's the first time, but what about the last? The last kiss, the last hug, the last time that you play basketball with your friends, the last time you see your friends, grandparents, parents, lover, your favorite horn in your hand to your lips, the last scratch of the pen on paper, the last word. Do you know when you have heard your favorite song for the last time? Or when you have eaten your last meal? Or when you have taken your last breath? It is my pleasure to be here with you this evening, and we'd like to end things tonight by introducing our final participant. This final performer was Poet Laureate of Kansas for 2017 and 2019. He teaches here at Emporia State University, where he leads the poetry and playwriting tracks. He has 14 books, at least that's what the current media says. There might be more by now, including Lisa's Flying Electric Piano, Kansas Notable Book, and Nelson Poetry Book Award winner. This band's plays have been produced across Kansas and on both coasts. He is the recipient of the Emporia State President's and Liberal Arts and Sciences Awards for Research and Creativity, and he's the winner of the Langston Hughes Award for Poetry. I also have to say, he's one hell of a guy. Please welcome my friend, Dr. Kevin Rivas.
Thanks, Curtis, and thanks for all who made this happen today. It's a joy to be able to share some stuff with you. And thanks to my class for, to my students for coming to class tonight and being with us. Yeah. You know, poetry readings are important, and readings of all sorts, including, it doesn't have to be poetry. And so I'm glad that we're able to share this, and thank you for coming. It's a joy to be among my fellow writers tonight. So many. So this is, I'm gonna play with the microphone here. Give me just a second. All right, can you hear me for certain? Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna read a poem that was written during the beginning of COVID as we know it. So we stay home. So we stay home, watch the rain, gray day, the lawn greening, the crocus up and trumpeting, and nowhere to go, no one to meet for lunch, the bug in the background. And so I listen to Mingus, Goodbye Pork Pie Hat, and pray for my parents in another town, and for jazz musicians out of work, home with their saxes and drums, rumbling somewhere like the Italian tenor singing from his window to an empty, empty street. And so, one of my poems for sure has to do with rebirth and renewal, so I wanted to make sure to bring that one, and I'm going to read it now. It's an older poem. I guess this is dating me, but it's at least 20 years old. So this is called Reseed. Like it's like spelled R-E-S-E-E-D, but maybe there's the double meaning of the homonym for that. Every cricket here has mated, hear it in the distant tone and timbre of a tired old drone, a chorus for those who now wear only white robes over lost bodies. That chorus which for us rises evenings in the cancer, neurologic, and geriatric wards where all are far beyond triage. Each moan we know echoes a voice from our final dark unknown. Forget the afterlife. God, give me back Wolverine passion, ability to dig my way into dirt road before truck tires crush, before hunters come with guns. Bring sky, settle my mind. No, fill my veins with red ants. Never allow my blood to cool or pool or stand placid as the surgeons before his work. Thunder among my muscles, hail upon my bleached bones. Rise nations, rise wind, bow wheat stalks in rivers. Scatter my seed to those only with wings. So that one's from a while ago. I think I was just dating Lisa when that was written. It goes back a little bit.
20 years.
It is 20 over this one. Anyway, so this one is a newer poem, and I'm actually going to leave that to the end. So sorry, false advertising there. So this is a poem that has horses in it. I guess that's enough. So. They gave me a horse called Kermit. His back sloped like it might hold a small pond in the middle. He was slow and did not startle. My parents and sister galloped off on their rides while mine trotted along, picking at flowers with his teeth, ambling. I tried a light kick to his side, or the words, "Go, man, go," but nothing. He could not be rushed. This was a gift when my father's ride rushed along, a gallop of legs and feet, madly running. The horse came to the highway and reared up, my father holding onto the reins with his life, shouting and cussing and maybe pissing himself. My mother's horse and my sister's horse followed, but only to the edge of the road, but that was enough. Neither of them ever got back on a horse. And my dad certainly didn't. But my horse kept to the path, the the little thin tan line through the trees, followed no one close, didn't even acknowledge the road. He stayed back, and I patted him and stroked his blonde mane. He knew what to do. Go slow and don't follow too close. I really love jazz. It's one of the things that is a passion of mine, having played drums off and on professionally. And there's this story about the trumpeter Maynard Ferguson that I'm going to retell here. I've heard trumpeter Maynard Ferguson had this one groupie who came up to him after a gig and showed him his teeth. Ferguson had this bad gap in the front of his teeth, could play high with fire. Some thought the gap might have helped. Well, this kid opened his mouth and grinned, showed and told Ferguson how he'd had his own teeth tailored to be just like his heroes. And Ferguson just grinned, his own teeth now ordinary, the gap gone, fixed. And Carrie was talking about how sometimes in this town we have the great gift and blessing of being able to write along with each other. And Carrie and I have been writing these poems that are kind of anti-bullying poems, and many of them include fights of some sort. And this one is a sparring fight as part of it. It's called There Was Something Wrong with That Red. And the guy's name was Red, that was his nickname. This hot-tempered guy, Red, trapped my leg on a kick and punched my ankle to injure me. So the tournament comes and I'm all swollen up, and they go through my forms for the judges, motion over motion, but I start limping towards the end, and Master Hogan pulls me aside, says I can't compete, can't fight that night. So Red has to fight someone else, someone from some other dojo, some guy who's all sorts of fast and strong, who starts kicking the snot out of Red. Starts kicking, and Red can't counter. But Red, with his rotten anger management problem, traps this guy's leg also and rustles him to the ground and starts kicking him in the head. This guy who has Red down 6 points to nothing. And so the ref steps in and calls it, has had enough of Red. And Master Hogan pulls our guy aside and sends him home from the dojo, suspends him. And before, Red had been going full force at me, at us, and we'd been pulling our punches, not going all out on him, but he refused to see it, wouldn't know. Plus, Red had been going especially hard on women and couldn't be trusted. There was something wrong with that Red. Okay, so there is that. Let's see. I'm going to end with one that is not a fighting poem, but has the word fight in it. And then I'm going to say a little bit of something, and then we'll move out into the night. At least I hope you get to move out into the night. If not, you're in the stacks, trapped here, and taking this progression. This one is called Please Don't Fight. Mark says, be good to your sister. Don't fight. Please don't fight. On the phone on our way back from Manhattan. His wife's left him. He's staying with his brother in Emporia. The night falling all around us, and the red lights on the big wind turbines pop on like wishes, like eyes, like the last of what the fire can give. Let's see. So we have a number of Visiting Writers Series programs coming up, one after another this semester. If you have a question about them, give me a holler. I don't want to misread what is coming up, but I'll post them also on Facebook on the Emporia Writers Group page. So that's a place you can go as a resource for that. Also, I'm an occasional member of the Emporia Writers Group in these near days. But as far as I know, the group still meets Wednesdays after work at Radius. I'm getting some nods, so that still goes. I come when I can, and I always leave invigorated and often write something after. So you also are welcome in the Emporia Writers Group. So come and hang, or just come to the next group of readings if you can. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to either Curtis or Rebecca maybe, or just say, have a good night.